Hi, my name is Mike North. I'm Children's and Young People's Advisor for the Sheffield Diocese, which is the Anglican Church around here. I've been a Christian all my life, really. I remember a time when I was about 12 years old where I really owned it for myself on a youth camp. That's kind of part of my story. But I've never left the church. I know a lot of people from my generation moved away from the church at some point, and some of them have never come back. But I've always been there. I do think it is difficult for young people to find faith, not because God is further away than he ever used to be, but because the world has changed. I think there are fewer churches and there are fewer youth groups, and possibly it's fair to say that churches are doing less in their community. Not always true. But generally speaking, I think that is true because there are fewer churches. So the chances for young people to engage with an active, lively church is harder because they're just not there. But I do believe that young people today are open spiritually in a way that they haven't been, certainly in my experience. I think spirituality and having a faith and believing in something seems to be in today's youth culture something that is more acceptable, whether that's because it makes you out to be a bit different, or whether it's exploring identity. All those things have probably come into it. So it is difficult, but I don't think God is further away. I think God is super close, and certainly young people who are exploring, the big questions of life, which young people have always done. If they have some encounter with Jesus, might just find him and find a faith in the same way that they've always done. I think there's also some truth about churches and the barriers that some churches can put up for young people. I know more and more in our society today that the LGBT community are finding it very hard to connect with churches, partly because they either feel that a lot of churches will not welcome them and will not accept them, or they have that perception that that is true. So I think it is a real challenge to the church to make sure that we are completely and utterly loving and welcoming of everyone, from no matter where you are in the world, and your sexuality and your race and your gender. So I think the church has got a lot to learn to make sure young people can find a home and a faith in church. I was born in the 70s and grew up in the 80s, the best decade I think ever to grow up in. But of course life in the 80s was very different, and being a young Christian in the 80s is very different to being a young Christian in today's world. The world has completely changed, and I remember my own experience growing up in a Baptist church, which I loved dearly. We had opportunities to lead things in the church. We were encouraged to lead our own group, our own youth group. And I really value those opportunities of involvement and participation and inclusion when I grew up as a young Christian. And I have no doubt that was the reason that I stayed with the church, because I felt I belonged and I had something to offer and contribute. And I think, in today's world, we sometimes forget that that's one of the biggest and most important reasons for being church together, is that we belong together and we give reason for each other to be there. So I think another challenge to the church today is, how many roles do we hold on to and not let the young people have a go? Are we welcoming and inclusive? Do we allow the young people to run services and to challenge the church about their mission and their activity in the community, and take a lead on those things and shape those things? I feel sometimes we control things too much in the church, and maybe that's another reason why the young people aren't staying with us. The Bible is hugely important to our faith. But so is church, and so is mission and activity, and worship and giving and serving and all those things. The Bible plays a hugely important role, but I know for many young people the Bible doesn't seem to be the right place to start. certainly to a non-book culture. If you're working with young people whose reading isn't going to be the way that they find God, to say to them, go home and read your Bible, probably isn't the best place to start. So I guess I'm a big believer in them encountering the living Word, encountering Jesus through us, through the church, through loving friends and family, and then to be encouraged to then go and find out who this Jesus is some more in a Bible that does work for you. That might be an Audible Bible off the internet, that might be an app, that might be a physical Bible like the Youth Bible or something accessible like that. God is always there. God never changes. So even though the world changes and our cultures change and society changes and technology changes, God is always there, and he's always close, and he's always longing for us just to turn our heads and look towards him. I think technology is part of our world, and I guess I believe that God can be in technology as well as outside technology. I don't think technology is the baddie in the world. How we use technology can be unhelpful, and I guess the pressures that I see many young people under with social media and the distraction of technology, and there's lots of research being done at the moment trying to prove one thing or another, that either social media is bad for you or spending too much time on your mobile phone is bad for you. And I guess the jury is out, but there's some common sense that I would apply to say, if you're filling all your empty down moments in the day with distraction, then that will be hindering your ability to reflect and to think and to wonder. I think wondering happens when there's space. So I always advocate in youth ministry to give young people space to think, space to turn off, space to allow their own thoughts to formulate. And I know some young people find that scary because they can't cope with their own thoughts because they've never had to. They've got to the age that they're at without ever having learnt to have that space and that silence. But it's really important, I think, for us to encourage our young people to be device free from time to time, go for a walk and have downtime, just to allow your mind to process some of the world that's happening around you, but also allow your heart and your spirit and your emotions to have a conversation with each other. And I think in those spots, God can really speak. So if we are so distracted by our technology, I think it's like we're building walls around ourselves, and we're not wanting God to be a part of that. And God can exist in the technology as well. He can exist in the noise and in the craziness of life as well. But the Bible wonderfully points out that God is often most powerfully perceived in the silent places and in the reflecting times. Jesus went away to pray for a reason, to show us that it's good to have downtime, to have reflection time. Where technology can help that, great. I'm a big fan of prayer apps, Bible reading apps, sharing testimonies, videos of testimonies being shared and stories being shared is all great faith building stuff. So I guess as time moves on and technology moves on and the world continues to change, I think God is there already. He's no more there or less there than he ever was. And I think the challenge is for us is to identify where are we building walls around ourselves to stop seeing God. And that's the challenge for young people as well, to think, is there space in my heart, in my head, in my life to actually see God and allow him to speak through my thoughts and through my heart, through my emotions, through my spirit.